Sarah Wilkes, a devoted wife and mother, finds her life unraveling when an affair with a charming new teacher, Ben, leads to a web of lies and betrayal. Torn between her loving but distant husband, Adam, and the thrilling escape Ben offers, Sarah faces a crossroads. As her secret comes to light, both men confront her with life-changing decisions. With trust broken and hearts shattered, can Sarah salvage what remains of her marriage, or will she walk away for a new, uncertain future? The stakes are high, and the choice she makes will define her life forever. It was the summer of 1995, a time when the world felt both innocent and chaotic. A turning point for many, like a moment frozen between two eras. The hum of life in the small town of Oak Ridge, tucked away in the rolling hills of North Carolina, was like the heartbeat of the world. Steady, predictable, and comforting. People knew each other by name, waved as they passed, and spent lazy afternoons drinking sweet tea on their porches. But beneath that calm surface, things weren't always what they seemed. The world had secrets, and Oak Ridge was no exception. Our story begins with Sarah Wilkes, a 32-year-old high school teacher, who spent most of her days imparting wisdom about literature to her students. With her short, dark hair and an easy smile that came almost too naturally, she seemed like the kind of person you could rely on. But like so many others, Sarah was hiding more than she let on. Her life had seemed perfect on the outside. Married to Adam Wilkes, the local mechanic, for 8 years, with 2 young children, and a house that smelled of vanilla and fresh-baked cookies. Yet, every once in a while, there was something in Sarah's eyes, something that hinted at a different reality, one she wasn't ready to face. Adam, on the other hand, was everything a small-town woman could hope for. Hard-working, dependable, and, by all accounts, completely in love with her. He had that steady presence, the kind that made you feel safe, even if it meant he could be a bit too quiet at times. Inside the Wilkes' home, Sarah stood at the kitchen counter, cutting vegetables for dinner. The camera lingered on her face for a moment, a slight furrow between her brows, her lips pursed as though lost in thought. Her mind wasn't entirely in the present. You see, Sarah had a secret that weighed heavily on her heart. She wasn't sure when it started or even why it happened, but a part of her felt a pull toward something, someone she couldn't ignore. Enter Ben Harper. Ben's face came into view. A tall, athletic man in his early 30s, with sun-kissed hair and a casual yet confident smile that could easily make anyone feel at ease. His presence in Oak Ridge was a new addition, and he quickly made a name for himself. He had been hired to teach physical education at the local high school, and there was something magnetic about him that drew people in. Ben had only been in town for a few months, but in that time, he'd managed to capture the attention of almost everyone. Students, parents, and even teachers like Sarah. It wasn't just his good looks or the way he carried himself. There was something else about him. A warmth, a charm that had a way of making people feel seen, heard. It wasn't long before Sarah found herself drawn to him, despite all the reasons she knew she shouldn't be. It started innocently enough. A friendly conversation after class, an unexpected smile in the hallways. But slowly, the conversations turned more frequent, and before Sarah knew it, she was seeking out his company. There was a thrill in it, something exhilarating, like a secret no one else knew. She never intended for it to go any further. After all, she loved Adam. She knew she had a family, a life that was already mapped out, stable, and secure. But with Ben, something was different. Every glance, every touch, seemed to spark a connection she couldn't explain. He made her feel alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. She tried to keep it casual, just friendly banter between colleagues, but it became harder to pretend that it was anything less than what it was. An attraction that neither of them seemed able to fight off. It wasn't long before their interactions became more intimate. Late nights at the school, when the halls were empty and only the sound of their footsteps echoed in the quiet. They would talk for hours, and eventually, those conversations led to a kiss. It wasn't planned, but it was inevitable. And once it happened, there was no turning back. Sarah's world became a whirlwind of emotions: guilt, excitement, and confusion. She told herself it was a mistake, something to forget. But every time she saw Ben, the pull became stronger. They began sneaking around, meeting in secret spots around town. Ben was patient, always reassuring Sarah that it didn't have to mean anything more than what it was in the moment. But Sarah knew better. She could feel the line blurring between what was a mistake and what was now something she couldn't control. As the weeks passed, Sarah's inner turmoil deepened. She couldn't deny the attraction, but the guilt was suffocating. Adam had no idea. He trusted her completely, and she was betraying that trust. Every time she saw him, holding the children in his arms, looking at her with that adoring smile, she felt her stomach twist. But then, when she saw Ben, she remembered the excitement, the connection, the way he made her feel like she was more than just a wife and mother. Her mind was a constant battle between the life she had built and the one that was slowly unraveling in secret. She was playing a dangerous game, and she knew it. But for some reason, she couldn't stop herself. There was something magnetic about Ben that she couldn't shake off, no matter how hard she tried. Then came the night that would change everything. It started like any other evening. Sarah was at home with Adam and the kids. They had dinner together, as usual. And afterward, Sarah helped put the children to bed. Adam, exhausted from his long day of work, settled in front of the TV, leaving Sarah with a moment of quiet. She told herself it was time to stop, to end things with Ben. She had to focus on her family, on what was truly important. But the more she tried to convince herself, the more she realized that the desire, the pull toward him, wasn't something she could simply ignore. That's when the phone rang. It was Ben. His voice on the other end was low, smooth. He told her he couldn't stop thinking about her, that he needed to see her. His words were both a temptation and a reminder of what was at stake. She hesitated, her heart racing in her chest. "I can't," she whispered, looking over at Adam, who was already half asleep on the couch. But Ben wouldn't take no for an answer. He said he'd be waiting at the old diner just outside town. "Just one more time, Sarah," he urged. "No one has to know you don't have to make a decision tonight." She hung up the phone, her mind swirling. What was she doing? She was walking a line she couldn't cross. Yet here she was, about to make the same mistake again. And in that moment, Sarah knew this wasn't just a secret anymore. It was something that would define the next chapter of her life. The choice she made tonight would set the course for everything that came after. The question was, did she have the strength to walk away from the life she had known? Or was it too late to turn back now? Sarah stood frozen, the phone pressed to her ear as Ben's voice lingered in her mind. She glanced over at Adam, who was snoring lightly on the couch, blissfully unaware of the war raging inside her. That gentle snore, the rhythm of his breathing, made her stomach twist with guilt. She couldn't explain why she was even entertaining the idea of meeting Ben. She loved Adam. She knew she did. At least she thought she did. But something about Ben stirred something in her that she hadn't felt in years. Her hand trembled as she set the phone down. She stood there, looking out the window, as if the answer to her dilemma might suddenly appear in the passing clouds. But it didn't. She knew deep down she couldn't ignore the pull anymore. She had to go. Later that night, Sarah found herself driving down the lonely road to the diner, her headlights casting long shadows across the empty street. The night felt heavier than usual, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for what was about to unfold. She could already feel the familiar rush of excitement in her chest. But beneath it, a cold knot of dread twisted tighter with every mile she drove. The diner was small, just a single neon sign flickering above the door, its light casting a weak glow over the asphalt. It felt like a secret place, a world apart from the one she had left behind with Adam. As Sarah stepped out of the car, she felt a sudden wave of doubt. Was this really worth it? What was she risking? Her heart raced as she pushed open the door, the familiar smell of fried food and coffee mixing with the sharp sting of anticipation. Ben was sitting at a booth in the corner, looking as relaxed as ever, a crooked smile on his lips when he saw her. "Sarah," he said, his voice warm, inviting, like he'd been waiting for her forever. "You came." There was no turning back now. Over the following days, the weight of the decision Sarah had made started to sink in. She tried to go back to her routine, tried to act like everything was fine. But every time she looked at Adam, every time he smiled at her or kissed her forehead as he left for work, she felt a sharp pang of guilt. She knew what she had done. And deep down, she knew it wasn't just a one-time mistake. The connection with Ben had grown into something deeper, something more intense than she'd ever expected. And now, it felt like a secret too big to carry alone. At school, things had shifted. Ben was always there, always close. It was hard to focus on anything else when he was around. His presence in the halls made Sarah feel seen in a way she hadn't realized she craved. It wasn't just the chemistry, the stolen kisses, or the late-night meetings. It was the way he made her feel, alive, desirable, like she was someone worth fighting for. But as the days went on, the guilt began to weigh even more heavily on Sarah. She started avoiding Adam, finding excuses to stay late at work or make plans with friends. The distance between them grew, and with it, the tension in their home. Adam noticed it. Of course he was a good man, but even he could sense when something was wrong. But Sarah couldn't bring herself to confess. She didn't know how to explain it, how to unravel the mess she'd created without destroying everything. One evening, as Sarah sat at the dinner table, picking at her food, Adam's voice broke through her thoughts. "Sarah, what's going on with you?" he asked, his tone more concerned than accusatory. "You've been distant lately." She could feel his eyes on her, the unspoken weight in his gaze, and for the first time in a long while, she found it difficult to breathe. She had to say something. Anything but what? "I'm just tired," she said, forcing a smile. "It's been a busy week, that's all." Adam nodded, but the look on his face told her he didn't believe her. He didn't press the issue, though, and the conversation drifted back to the kids, as it always did. But as she cleared the table that night, she could feel the walls she had built between them growing higher. In the days that followed, the pressure started to mount. Ben called her more frequently, his messages growing more intense. The spark that had started as a mere flirtation was now a full-fledged fire, and Sarah felt herself getting pulled deeper into it with each passing day. Then came the turning point, an invitation from Ben to take things further. It was a Saturday afternoon when the message came through. The words were simple, but the meaning was undeniable. "Let's make it official, just us. No more hiding." Sarah stared at the message for what felt like hours. Her thumb hovered over the screen, unsure of what to do. She knew this was it, the point of no return. She had already crossed so many lines. But this, if she agreed to this, there was no going back. It would be more than just a physical affair. It would be a full commitment to the lie she had been living. She spent the next few hours pacing the house, her mind racing with thoughts of what she was about to lose and what she might gain. Adam's laughter echoed in the background as he played with the kids, oblivious to the turmoil inside her. She could hear their footsteps as they ran through the house, the door creaking as it opened and closed. But all she could think about was Ben. The life she had with him, and the life she had with Adam. She knew she needed to make a decision. That night, after the kids were in bed, Sarah found herself alone in the living room, her heart pounding in her chest. She had stayed up late, waiting for Adam to fall asleep. She had to make the call. No more running from it. Her phone buzzed, and it was Ben again. "Are you in?" it read. In that moment, she knew what she had to do. Without thinking, she hit send. The reply was short, but it carried all the weight of her decision. "I'm in." For a moment, Sarah just sat there, staring at her phone in disbelief. Had she really just done that? Had she really chosen to continue this, to step deeper into the lie, to abandon the life she had built? She didn't know, but the reality was sinking in fast. She had made her choice. The next few days were a blur. The guilt and excitement twisted together, becoming a constant presence in Sarah's life. She met with Ben more often, each meeting more intense than the last. The passion was undeniable, but so was the shame. Every stolen moment with him felt like a betrayal, but at the same time, every moment felt like a relief from the life she had come to resent. Then, things took a darker turn. Adam began to grow suspicious. He had been noticing the late nights, the unexplained absences, the way Sarah had pulled away from him. His concern had shifted into something else, something sharper, more urgent. And that was when the storm started to brew. Remember to live, share, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on the next chapter of this emotional journey. Stay with us as Sarah faces the consequences of her choices in the next step of her story. The days that followed Sarah's decision felt like a fever dream. She was constantly on edge, walking a razor-thin line between the life she knew with Adam and the life she was beginning to create with Ben. Each moment of passion, each whispered promise, only deepened the sense of guilt that gnawed at her insides. But at the same time, there was a part of her that felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. The mundane had slipped away, and in its place was something thrilling, unpredictable, dangerous. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, the cracks in Sarah's carefully constructed world began to show. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when Adam's suspicions reached a boiling point. Sarah had been late coming home from work again, her mind wrapped up in thoughts of Ben. She barely noticed the clock ticking away, the minutes turning into hours. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, she finally arrived home, her heart heavy in her chest. She was expecting the usual greeting, Adam smiling as he put the kids to bed. But something was different. The air was thick with tension. Adam was sitting on the couch, his arms crossed over his chest, his face set in a hard expression. The moment Sarah stepped inside, he looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice steady, but strained. Sarah froze, her mind racing. She had rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times, but now that it was happening, she was caught off guard. She had no good answer, no way to explain her late nights, her growing distance. "I was just at school, grading papers," she said, her voice shaky as she walked toward him. "You know how it is. Long days." Adam didn't buy it. He stared at her for a moment, his gaze piercing, as if trying to read the truth in her eyes. Finally, he sighed, the frustration clear in his features. "No, Sarah. Something's wrong. You've been acting strange for weeks, I can feel it. What's going on?" The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the weight of the lie she was living pressing down on her. She couldn't keep this up much longer. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. But before she could respond, the phone rang. It was a simple moment, one that would have been easily ignored in any other context, but in that moment, It felt like a lifeline. Sarah glanced at Adam, then at the phone. Without thinking, she picked it up. "Hello?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. It was Ben. "I need to see you," he said, his voice low, almost urgent. "Tonight, it can't wait." Sarah felt a chill run through her. She knew what he meant. This was a turning point, a moment of no return. She couldn't afford to ignore him, not now, not when things had gone so far. Adam was still staring at her, waiting for her to explain. But Sarah knew she couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. She was tangled in a web of lies that she couldn't untangle, at least not without losing everything. "I have to go," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Adam blinked, taken aback. "What, Sarah? Where are you going?" I don't know," she said, her voice shaking. "I just need some space, some time to think." Adam's face fell, and for a moment, she saw the hurt in his eyes. "Think about what, Sarah? About us, about this family?" The question hung in the air, a dagger of guilt in her chest. But before she could respond, she turned and walked out the door. She couldn't stay. Not with Adam's eyes boring into her. Not with the weight of the truth pressing down on her. She needed to be with Ben. She needed to feel alive again, to feel desired. The drive to the diner felt like an eternity. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Her mind was racing, the thoughts colliding in a whirlwind of confusion. She knew she was making a mistake. She knew that, even as she sped toward the edge of her own destruction, there was no way back. When she arrived at the diner, Ben was already there, waiting for her in the corner booth. His smile, warm and reassuring, was the only thing that made her feel like she hadn't completely lost herself. "You came," he said, his voice laced with relief. "I was starting to think you'd change your mind." I had to get away," Sarah said, sitting down across from him, her hands still trembling. "Adam. He knows something's wrong." Ben reached across the table, taking her hand in his. His touch was gentle, soothing, but there was an intensity in his gaze. "It's okay," he said softly. "We'll figure this out. Just you and me. We deserve this, Sarah." Her heart beat faster as he spoke, and for a moment, the weight of everything else seemed to melt away. She was with him now. Nothing else mattered. But as the night wore on, Sarah began to feel the first stirrings of doubt. The passion that had fueled her choices now felt like a sinking weight, pulling her under. She looked at Ben, but she couldn't shake the image of Adam's face from her mind. His hurt, his confusion. It was becoming too much for her to bear. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Sarah said suddenly, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't keep lying to him. I can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not." Ben's expression softened, but there was an edge to his words. "You made a choice, Sarah. You can't just turn back now." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "But what if I lose everything? What if I lose him? What if I lose myself?" Ben leaned in, his face inches from hers. "You won't lose me. I'm not going anywhere. And if you really want to be with him, then you need to decide. You can't have both. You have to choose." The words echoed in Sarah's mind, like a verdict she couldn't escape. She had already crossed so many lines. What was one more? But then, in the stillness of the diner, the weight of her choices seemed unbearable. She couldn't keep living this double life. Something had to give. The next day, Adam confronted her again. This time, there was no avoiding the truth. He had found the messages, the late-night texts, the secret calls, the lies she'd told him. "You think I'm stupid?" Adam's voice was low, controlled, but the anger in his eyes was unmistakable. I know what's been going on, Sarah. I know about you and him. Sarah felt the ground fall out from beneath her. She had never seen Adam like this. So calm, so sure of himself. It was as if he had already accepted the truth, and now, all that was left was for her to confirm it. I didn't mean for it to happen, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. It's not what you think. I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt you. Then why did you do it? Adam asked, his voice breaking. Why, Sarah? Why would you betray me like this? The tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she couldn't speak. The shame, the guilt, it choked her. She had no excuse. There was no way to explain away what she had done. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know how it got to this point. Adam stood up, his face a mixture of hurt and disbelief. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, Sarah. I don't know if I even want to try. The tension between them was unbearable, and that's when the confrontation with Ben happened. Remember to live, share, comment, and subscribe to stay tuned for the next part of Sarah's emotional journey. You won't want to miss the shocking twists and turns coming next. The confrontation was inevitable. Sarah knew it, and so did Adam. The discovery of the secret messages, the late-night calls, everything had built to this moment. There was no running from the truth anymore. Adam had seen enough. He was no longer the calm, patient husband she had once known. His face was flushed with anger, his voice low but intense, as he stood across from Sarah in their living room, the very room where they had laughed and loved for years. The tension in the air was palpable, the weight of the truth hanging like a heavy storm cloud. You think I don't know what's been going on? Adam's voice cracked, but his eyes burned with the rawness of betrayal. You think I didn't see the signs? I've been waiting, hoping this wasn't happening. But now I know everything. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen Adam like this before. The man who had always been her rock, her steady presence, was now a stranger, his hurt and disbelief churning into something darker. She had always thought that their bond was unbreakable, but now, in this moment, she realized just how fragile it truly was. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Adam, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The tears started to well up in her eyes, but she couldn't find the words to explain. How could she? What excuse could she offer for the lie she had been living? There was no justification for her actions, only guilt, regret, and the crushing weight of knowing she had destroyed the life they had built together. You didn't mean to. Adam's voice rose, the bitterness creeping in. Well, I didn't mean to be blind, Sarah. I didn't mean to trust you like I did. I didn't mean to love you this much. The words stung. They hit Sarah like a physical blow, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. She had never meant for things to go this far. She had never meant to hurt him, but now it was too late to take it back. I'm sorry, she managed to choke out. I don't know what I was thinking. I never wanted to hurt you, but You what? Adam cut her off, stepping closer. You wanted to feel alive? You wanted excitement. You wanted a distraction from this life, from the family we've built. Is that it? His words were like daggers, each one slicing deeper than the last. Sarah couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They fell freely, streaking down her face. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. Adam was right. She had betrayed him, and there was no undoing that. I don't know what I wanted, she said, her voice breaking. I just wanted to feel like I mattered again. Adam's expression softened for just a moment, but it was fleeting. He took a step back, his hand gripping the edge of the chair as if trying to hold himself together. You mattered, Sarah. You always mattered, but you chose to throw it all away. And in that moment, Sarah knew. The walls between them had been shattered, and there was no rebuilding them. Not now. Not after everything. The confrontation with Adam left Sarah emotionally raw, drained, and uncertain of what to do next. Her mind was a whirlwind of guilt, regret, and fear. She had lost Adam, that much was certain. But what about Ben? What about the man who had swept her off her feet, who had made her feel seen and wanted in a way she hadn't felt in years? She tried to call Ben, but he didn't answer. She left him a message, her voice trembling as she spoke. Ben, I don't know what to do anymore. Adam found out everything I can't. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep living this lie. Please, call me. But the hours passed, and there was no word from Ben. Panic began to set in. What if he didn't care? What if, now that the secret was out, he was done with her, just like Adam had been? The thought made her sick to her stomach. She had gambled everything on Ben, and now she was left with nothing. The next day, Adam was gone. He didn't say where he was going, but it didn't matter. He needed space, and Sarah knew he had every right to take it. She had ruined everything, and she had no idea how to fix it. She couldn't fix it. Not now. Not after everything she had done. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Ben. Her heart skipped a beat as she quickly opened it. Sarah, I don't think I can do this anymore. I need to step away, I'm sorry, but I think it's for the best. The words hit her like a freight train. She read them over and over, hoping they would somehow change, hoping they were just a bad dream, but they weren't. They were real. Ben was done with her. The man she had risked everything for had walked away. Sarah's world collapsed in that moment. She had lost Adam. She had lost Ben. And now, she was alone. Completely alone. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah tried to piece her life back together. She threw herself into her work, attempting to find some semblance of normalcy, but it felt like she was walking through life in a fog. The house was quieter now, emptier. Adam had come back briefly to pack his things, but he didn't stay. He couldn't. The damage was done. One evening, as Sarah sat alone in their living room, staring blankly at the walls, she heard a knock on the door. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be Adam? Or perhaps Ben, coming back to explain himself, to say that everything would be okay? She opened the door, but it wasn't Adam. It wasn't Ben. It was her neighbor, Lisa. I'm sorry to bother you, Sarah, Lisa said softly, her eyes full of sympathy. But I just wanted to check in on you. I know you're going through a tough time, and I wanted to offer my support. Sarah blinked, taken aback. She hadn't expected anyone to reach out. Not like this. Not when she had pushed everyone away. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, her voice hoarse. I don't really know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Lisa replied, her voice warm. Sometimes it's enough just to be here. And in that moment, something shifted inside Sarah. She wasn't alone, not completely. And maybe that was the first step toward healing. Maybe, just maybe, she could start rebuilding, one small piece at a time. As Sarah stood at the crossroads of her life, she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The aftermath of her choices had left deep scars, and she would carry them for a long time. But perhaps, in time, she could learn to forgive herself and, in doing so, rebuild her life. And as she watched the sun set on the horizon, she realized that, while she couldn't undo the past, she still had the power to shape her future. It wouldn't be the same, but maybe, just maybe, it could be better. Remember to live, share, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on Sarah's journey. The twists and turns aren't over yet. Stay tuned for what comes next. Days passed, and life for Sarah felt like an endless spiral of self-doubt and regret. She couldn't stop thinking about the choices she had made, the way she had torn apart her family and her future. Adam was gone, and Ben had disappeared without a word. For a while, Sarah tried to numb herself with work, but it was no use. The ache in her chest never went away. She couldn't shake the feeling that her world had crumbled, and no matter how hard she tried, there was no way to rebuild it. But then, something unexpected happened. Adam called. It wasn't much of a conversation. Just a few clipped words that left Sarah hanging on every syllable. He said he was back in town, that he wanted to meet. The words were like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew one thing for sure. This meeting would be pivotal. It was a chance for answers, for reconciliation, or perhaps a final goodbye. Her mind raced as she prepared herself for whatever was about to unfold. She spent the next few hours pacing the house, her thoughts tangled in a web of what-ifs. She hadn't seen Adam in weeks. The distance between them had become unbearable, and she had no idea where to even begin picking up the pieces. When Sarah arrived at the coffee shop, her hands were shaking. She hadn't felt this nervous in years, not even before she'd started the affair. Adam was already sitting at a table near the window, his back to the door. For a moment, Sarah just stood there, watching him. The man she had once known so well now felt like a stranger. His posture was rigid, his jaw clenched as though he were holding back a storm of emotions. "Sarah," Adam said, his voice low as he looked up, locking eyes with her. The anger was gone, replaced by a dull weariness, as if he had fought the battle of emotions and had finally come to terms with something he wasn't ready to face. "Adam," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know how to do this." He sighed, a tired sound that filled the space between them. "You don't have to do anything, Sarah. I'm just here to talk. I think we both need to understand what's happened." Sarah sat down slowly, her heart racing in her chest. "I'm sorry," she said, the words coming out too easily. She'd said them so many times by now, but they never felt like enough. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Adam studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "I know you didn't, but that doesn't change what happened, does it?" His voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, an unspoken pain that cut deep. "You're not the woman I thought you were, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again." The words hit Sarah like a slap. She had known this was coming, but hearing him say it out loud made everything so much more real. She felt a lump form in her throat, but she forced herself to keep it together. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said quietly. "I don't deserve it. I need you to understand that I never stopped loving you, Adam. I never wanted to hurt you. But somewhere along the way, I got lost." Adam's expression softened slightly, but it was clear he was still wrestling with his own emotions. "I know, Sarah, I know," he murmured. "But that's the problem, isn't it? We've both gotten lost somewhere along the way." There was a long silence between them, filled only by the hum of the coffee shop. Sarah could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had no answers, no solutions. But she knew one thing. She couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't keep carrying the burden of her mistakes. "Maybe we need time," Adam said finally, breaking the silence. "Maybe we need time to figure out who we are now. But I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. Sarah, I can't do it anymore." Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "But I understand if you need to walk away." For a moment, Adam didn't respond. He simply stared at her, his gaze intense and unreadable. And then finally, he spoke again. "I'm not sure what's next for us, Sarah. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I also don't know if I'm ready to give up on us. Not yet." The words were a small spark of hope, but they didn't erase the years of hurt between them. They were both standing on the edge of something, not sure whether to step forward or turn away. That night, Sarah lay in bed, unable to sleep. Her mind was racing, replaying the conversation over and over again. What did Adam mean by not being ready to give up? Was there still a chance for them? Or was he just holding on to the idea of their past, unable to let go even though their future had been shattered? Her phone buzzed, and for a moment, Sarah thought it might be Adam again. But when she checked, it was a message from Ben. Her heart skipped a beat. "I think we need to talk," the message read. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Ben had disappeared for weeks, and now, out of nowhere, he wanted to talk. What did that even mean? What did he want from her? She hesitated for a long moment before replying, her fingers trembling as she typed out a response. "What is there to talk about, Ben? You made your choice. You walked away." The message sent, and she waited. The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Then, finally, her phone buzzed again. "I didn't walk away, Sarah." Ben's message came through. "I just needed to see if you were serious, if you could really leave everything behind for me." The words hit her like a storm, and she felt a mix of anger and confusion flood her chest. How could he even ask that? How could he make her feel like she had to choose all over again? She stared at the screen for a long time, unsure of what to say next. Her world was spinning out of control. She was caught between two men, each with their own expectations, their own desires, and she didn't know which direction to take. All she wanted was peace. But that seemed impossible now. Finally, she typed a response, her hands shaking. "I'm not sure I can choose, Ben. I'm not sure I even know who I am anymore." As soon as the message sent, her phone buzzed again. "I think we both need to figure that out," Ben replied. The next few days were filled with tension. Sarah felt the weight of her choices bearing down on her. Each moment a reminder of the mess she had made. Adam's words echoed in her mind, as did Ben's. She was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the consequences of her actions. The most significant moment came one afternoon when Adam returned to the house to pick up some of his things. Sarah wasn't expecting him, and when she saw him standing there in the doorway, she felt the sharp pang of loss again. "I've been thinking about what you said," Adam began, his voice calm but steady. "About not knowing if we can start over, and I've realized something." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What?" "I can't keep living in the past, Sarah," Adam said, his voice breaking, "but I'm not sure I can forgive you. Not right now." Her heart shattered in that moment, but she held her ground. She had to face the consequences of her choices. There was no more running, no more pretending. "I understand," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I never expected you to forgive me. I just wanted a chance to make things right." And as she stood there, looking at the man she had once loved, she realized that no matter how hard she tried, things could never go back to the way they were. She had lost both Adam and Ben, and now all that was left was the long road ahead of her. Remember to live, share, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on Sarah's journey. The truth is never easy, and the hardest part of all might just be facing the future alone. Stay tuned for what happens next. The days following Sarah's conversation with Adam were some of the hardest of her life. Every waking moment felt like she was walking through a fog, the weight of her decisions pressing on her chest with each breath. She had lost Adam's trust, and now she had no idea how to rebuild it. Ben's sudden return into her life added even more complication, a reminder of the betrayal she'd experienced with both men. There was no clear path forward, just an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. Then, one evening, as Sarah was sitting on the back porch, trying to process everything, her phone buzzed. The screen showed Ben's name. Her heart skipped a beat, and she hesitated before answering. "Sarah," Ben said, his voice steady. But there was something in it, a quiet determination. "We need to talk." Her pulse quickened. "What about?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I need to see you," Ben replied. "This can't wait." A knot tightened in her stomach. She'd promised herself she wouldn't get caught up in this again. She had already destroyed her relationship with Adam. But the pull of Ben's words, the unresolved tension between them, made it impossible to ignore. "I'll meet you," Sarah said, her voice soft but resigned. She didn't know what she was walking into, but she knew one thing. This conversation would be the final piece of the puzzle. The place where they met was secluded, a small park just outside town. The trees provided shelter from the late afternoon sun, and the quiet made everything feel even more intimate. Ben was already there when Sarah arrived, leaning against the metal fence that ran along the park's edge. He looked like he hadn't changed a bit. His dark eyes still held that familiar spark, the same one that had drawn Sarah to him from the start. But this time, there was a tension in the air between them that hadn't existed before. "Ben," Sarah said softly, taking a few steps closer. "Sarah?" he greeted, his voice tinged with the slightest hint of unease. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the past hanging between them. Finally, Ben broke the stillness. "Look, I didn't want it to go down like this," Ben said, his voice low. "I never meant to hurt you or Adam, but I think I've been running from what I really feel." Sarah looked at him, her mind racing. Was he going to say it? Was he going to admit what she had already known for so long? "I've been avoiding this conversation for a while now," Ben continued, his words slower this time, deliberate. "The truth is, I've been trying to figure out whether I'm just a distraction for you, or if what we had really meant something. Because I don't want to be just the guy you run to when things get hard. Sarah, I need to know that I'm not just an escape." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Ben wasn't just challenging the affair. He was challenging everything they had built together, everything that had once felt so undeniable. The realization came crashing down on her. This wasn't about Adam anymore. This was about her, and the choices she had made. "Ben, Sarah began, but her voice faltered as emotions swirled inside her. She had no answers, no way to explain the mess she had created. "I don't know what I want anymore. I don't know who I am." Ben's expression softened, but it was clear that something had changed in him too. "I think I know what you need, Sarah," he said quietly. "You need to make a choice, but not just for me, or for Adam, for yourself." The words hung in the air between them. It was the most honest moment they'd shared in weeks, and it hit Sarah like a tidal wave. She had spent so long trying to avoid the consequences of her actions, running from the truth, from herself. And now, in this quiet park, Ben had finally laid it bare. There was no running anymore. She had to face the fallout of everything she had done. Over the next few days, Sarah did what she hadn't done in months. She thought. She thought about her life with Adam, the love they had shared, the family they had built. She thought about Ben, and the magnetic pull he had always had on her. And she thought about herself, who she had become in the wake of her choices. The confusion and guilt were unbearable, but there was one thing that had become clear. She couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't keep juggling the wreckage of her relationships, pretending that everything could work itself out. It was time to face the truth. Adam had called earlier in the week, asking if they could meet again. She had agreed, but now, as the day approached, Sarah felt the anxiety begin to churn in her stomach. What was she going to say? How could she explain everything, knowing that the damage was already done? When they met that afternoon, the tension between them was palpable. Adam didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady but edged with hurt. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about wanting a chance to fix things." Sarah didn't speak. She knew Adam well enough to understand that he wasn't going to wait forever, and she also knew that, despite everything, she still loved him. "I don't know where we go from here," Adam said, his voice softer now. "But I think we both need closure, don't you?" Closure. The word echoed in Sarah's mind. That was exactly what she needed too. But could closure be found in the pieces they had broken apart? Could they ever go back to the way things were? "I don't know if I can fix this," Sarah whispered, "but I'm willing to try." Adam's eyes softened slightly, but there was a sadness there too. "I want to try too, Sarah. But I need you to understand something. I'm not going to wait forever. I can't keep living in the shadow of what happened. You need to figure out if you're still in this with me, or if it's already over." The finality in Adam's words hit Sarah harder than she expected. It wasn't just a plea for reconciliation, it was a challenge. He was done waiting, done hoping that things would somehow just fall back into place. "I will," Sarah said quietly, her voice shaking. "I will figure it out." The next few days felt like an eternity. Every moment Sarah spent in the quiet of her house, with nothing but her thoughts for company, felt like a reckoning. She couldn't continue to live in the past, clinging to the ghosts of what she had lost. But the future felt uncertain, an abyss that she wasn't sure how to cross. And then came the moment that would push her over the edge. She received another message from Ben. This time, there were no pleasantries, no promises of reconciliation. Just words. "Sarah, I need you to decide. I can't keep waiting for you to choose. If you want me, I'll be here. If not, I think it's time to let go." The words were simple, but they shook her to the core. She had reached the crossroads, and now there was only one thing left to do. She had to choose. Remember to live, share, comment, and subscribe to keep up with Sarah's journey. With the tension rising, who will she choose? The man who was once her everything, or the man who awakened something inside her she didn't even know she wanted? Stay tuned for the shocking conclusion. The final decision hung in the air like an electric current, crackling with uncertainty. Sarah stood at the crossroads of her life, the weight of her choices pressing on her chest. Adam had given her the space to decide, but time was running out. Ben, too, had laid his cards on the table. He had offered her the chance to be with him, but only if she could let go of the past. The days after their conversations felt like a blur. Sarah had spent so many hours staring out the window, lost in thought, her mind constantly running through the same scenarios. Could she fix things with Adam? Could she rebuild their marriage, despite everything that had happened? Or had she already ruined it beyond repair? And with Ben, the man who had once offered her a taste of something new, something thrilling, could that be enough to sustain her? Or was it just another escape, another fleeting distraction? Then came the final moment, the one that would decide everything. Sarah found herself sitting in a small cafe in town, waiting. Adam had asked to meet her again. This time, she wasn't sure what would happen, but she knew this meeting would be the one that defined the future of their relationship. When Adam walked in, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. He looked the same, but there was a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet sadness. The man who had once been her partner, the person she had built her life with, now seemed like a stranger. "Sarah," Adam said softly, sitting down across from her. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said before, about us, about everything." Sarah nodded, but she couldn't find the words. The fear, the guilt, it was all still there, swirling in her chest. How could she explain everything she had done? How could she make things right? "I know I messed up," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I hurt you, and I don't know if I can ever make up for that. Adam studied her for a long time before speaking. You can't go back in time. Sarah, neither of us can. But what I've realized is that I'm not ready to give up on us. I can't keep living with all the what-ifs. I don't know if we can fix everything, but I do know that I want to try. The relief that flooded Sarah's chest was almost overwhelming. She hadn't realized how much she had been holding on to until that moment. Adam wasn't asking for everything to be fixed in an instant. He was asking for the chance to rebuild, one step at a time. I want to try too, Sarah said, her voice shaking with emotion. I'm sorry for everything. I never wanted to hurt you. Adam, I love you. The words felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders, but she knew that love alone wasn't enough to fix everything. There was a long road ahead. They both knew it. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah believed that it was possible to walk that road together. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Adam slowly began to rebuild. There were no quick fixes, no magic words that made everything better. But with each day, they started to rediscover the connection they had once shared. They talked, really talked, in a way they hadn't in years. They shared their pain, their regrets, their hopes for the future, and slowly, piece by piece, they began to put their marriage back together. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was real, and that was enough. Meanwhile, Ben remained a distant figure in Sarah's life. She hadn't heard from him since that last conversation. At first, she had hoped he might reach out, but as time passed, she realized that she had made her decision. She wasn't going to run away anymore. She wasn't going to cling to the idea of an easy escape. What mattered now was the life she had with Adam, the family they had built together. Ben had taught her something important, that she couldn't live for the thrill, for the chase. That wasn't real life. Real life was the quiet moments, the ones that didn't need to be exciting to matter. And in those moments, she realized that she had what she needed all along: the love, the stability, the partnership. It wasn't always perfect, but it was real. Months passed, and as Sarah settled into a new rhythm with Adam, she began to feel like herself again. She had learned hard lessons during the chaos, about love, trust, and the importance of facing the truth, no matter how painful it might be. She had learned that running away, even for a moment, only led to more heartache. And most importantly, she had learned that real strength wasn't in avoiding mistakes, but in owning them and doing the hard work to move forward. One evening, as Sarah and Adam sat together on the couch, watching their children play in the backyard, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The road to forgiveness had been long, and it hadn't been easy. But here they were, together, and that was all that mattered. I never thought we'd be here again, Adam said, his voice quiet but sincere. But I'm glad we are. Sarah smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Me too, she said softly. Me too. They didn't need words after that. In that moment, they both understood the future wasn't set in stone. It was a work in progress, like everything else. But for the first time in a long time, they were both willing to build it, together. As Sarah looked back on the journey she had taken, she realized that it wasn't just about the relationships she had lost or the mistakes she had made. It was about the person she had become through all of it. She had faced her own demons, had taken responsibility for her actions, and had come out stronger on the other side. The story wasn't over, but it had reached a turning point, one where Sarah knew she had the power to shape her own future, to define what came next. And no matter where that road led, she knew she wasn't walking it alone. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed Sarah's journey, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more captivating stories. Stay tuned for future videos that explore life's twists and turns and the strength we all find within ourselves when we face our hardest challenges.